And today we are here for a hearing on docket number 0286, message in order to declare surplus certain city-owned, formerly Boston Planning and Development Agency-owned parcels of vacant land in East Boston. I want to remind everyone that this public hearing is being recorded and broadcast live on channels Comcast 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 1964, as well as streaming on the City of Boston website. We will take public testimony at the end, should anyone wish to offer some. And without further ado then, I will hand it over to our administration representatives.
Good afternoon, James McDonough, Department of Neighborhood Development, Legal Counsel.
Good afternoon, Donald Wright, Deputy Director, Real Estate Management and Sales.
And good afternoon, William Epperson, Assistant Director for Real Estate Management and Sales for the City of Boston's Department of Neighborhood Development. Councilor, I'm here before you today to request the surplus of these 3 parcels in the East Boston neighborhood, District 1. These 3 parcels are formerly BPDA parcels that were acquired by that agency in November of 2007. They were transferred to the Department of Neighborhood Development in August of 2015 for development as affordable housing, as these parcels were originally acquired using inclusionary development funding. In January of 2017, this D&D initiated a community process in coordination with the Eagle Hill Civic Association to discuss the development of these parcels. And with strong community support, we released an RFP for the site in May of 2017 for a mixed-income, mixed-use development that incorporated artist work live space. We received 4 proposals that we took out to the community for a presentation in October of 2017, and we intend to present a recommendation for a tentative developer designation at the March 14th Public Facilities Commission, just around the corner. So these 3 parcels in total are 26,250 square feet. They are across the street from the former Hess oil site that the BPDA has designated the East Boston CDC for redevelopment of. They have a combined assessed value of just under $560,000 and have an appraised value of $720,000. And should they be voted as surplus, again, we plan to make the recommendation at the next Public Facilities Commission for a development proposal that incorporates ownership and rental, a good mixture of affordability with 2/3 affordable, 1/3 market, and they incorporate artist live space and community artist workspace.
Okay, great. Do either of you gentlemen wish to add anything? Okay, so just a few questions for context as I present this back to the council. How many units do you anticipate?
The current plan that we're going to recommend has 41 units.
41 units.
2/3 of those are affordable and 1/3 is market rate.
Okay. And by affordable, which percentage AMI is?
It has a strong affordability, and if you're interested, I can actually read to you the mix, and I'll actually also detail the mix of ownership versus rental.
Okay.
So total of 41 units in 2 buildings. There will be 8 sales and 33 rental opportunities. 2 of the sales will be moderate income at 80% of area median income. 3 will be middle income sales at 100% of AMI, and 3 will be market rate sales. There will be 4 voucher-assisted rental units, restricted at or below of 30% AMI. There will be 3 affordable rental units restricted at or below of 60% AMI. There will be 17 artist rental units restricted at or below 60% AMI. And there will be 9 market rate rental units. And those market rate rental and ownership units are being used to cross-subsidize the development, so the city has to contribute fewer resources for those affordable housing units.
Okay. And in terms of the artist housing, it's a studio arranged, a live work type?
Actually, all of the units are identical. There's no differentiation between the units, but a certain portion of those units are being set aside for the artists. And then down below, there's community artist workspace. And then the development that we're recommending also incorporates public gallery space.
Okay.
So there's going to be public areas where the public can come in and actually see work displayed by the artists that live and work there.
Okay. And so, but just by designating it as an artist unit, it's just saying that you have to have that certification to apply for it?
Correct.
Okay. And then is there any potential, I had heard that San Francisco in increasing their federally subsidized affordable units we're able to work with the agencies to have some sort of preference for very, very local residents by census tract or something like that. Has Boston ever, this is not necessarily relevant to this,
Right.
but,
That's been a bit of a challenge for us, and we've been working extensively with the Office of Fair Housing locally to try to get that. We have come up with some recent new language. We're calling it anti-displacement language, which puts a priority onto the local neighborhoods. That's very new. We've used it, I think, on a couple of other offerings, and we try to incorporate it whenever we can,
okay. And so will it be in place here?
if
or-
possible.
Okay, and what will that,
After the tentative designation, once we've actually selected a developer, then we have a one-year diligence period where we work out all of the financing details, all of the entitlements, permitting, all of the variances, and it would be during that time when all of that gets worked out. Once we have a developer designated, that's when we create the fair housing plan, and it would be part of the fair housing plan.
great. And generally, so not specific to this situation, generally, what does the anti-displacement language do?
Basically, it puts a preference for that area who's being impacted by the
neighborhood or
development,
by
that
precinct
neighborhood, that
Okay.
exact neighborhood, and trying to get folks within that neighborhood who would be most impacted by that development to have an opportunity to live in that space as a means of trying to prevent further gentrification in all of the neighborhoods.
Okay. And then in terms of the actual disposition, is there a contract price that happens? Is it already set through the RFP, or, people have already bid and that's it? Or is it kind of renegotiated through the diligence period? Or-
So folks have already bid, and it typically is renegotiated during the diligence period, but this project will be heavily subsidized. So our focus will be on keeping the public subsidy at its lowest, as opposed to trying to get revenues out of the sale. Any additional revenue that the city would receive from a negotiation and the increase in the purchase price would be offset by an increase in the subsidy.
Okay, and I guess with the multiple bidders and before designation, maybe you don't have all the details, but what is the subsidy about going to be?
I don't have that exact information. That would be available once we do have the developer designation, which again would hopefully be on March 14th.
Okay, so in terms of what we're conveying to a developer, it would be the land for somewhere between the $560,000, $720,000, range of value, plus an additional subsidy to build these affordable units with the market.
Yes, and just for clarity, the value is between the 560 and 720, but it most likely will be conveyed at no cost at a nominal fee, likely of $300, $100 per parcel, given that the city is putting in such significant resources to the project.
Okay, great, yeah, that's what I meant, is that
Okay.
we're essentially giving them that value for
Exactly,
free plus
yes.
the, whatever subsidy happens.
Correct.
Okay. And let me see if I have any other questions before I turn it over to Counselor Edwards. Okay, so is the process that you went through for this set of parcels, in terms of going out to the neighborhood association, having a 5-month period there before the RFP, and then presentations another 4 months after that, is that about the typical timeframe?
Typical, yeah. We often will allow time for the community to provide input, and then we always like to fully vet the proposals that we have received prior to taking them out to the community to get additional community input after those proposals have been received. So I'd say yes, it was very typical.
Okay. Counselor Edwards, do you have any questions?
Hi.
Hello, good afternoon.
I just had a quick question, or some series of questions
Sure.
on the process here. Which community association? Oh, Eagle Hills?
Eagle Hill
Associ-
Civic
okay.
Association, yes.
And then is this a result of IDP funding from another project in East Boston?
That's where these came from. These parcels were former BPDA parcels that they acquired in 2007 with the inclusionary development funding. And then those parcels were routed along with the IDP program to D&D in 2015.
Right,
Yeah.
is there a project in East Boston, a luxury or some sort of one of the waterfront property that specifically paid for this?
I wouldn't
An
know that.
Off-site?
The BPDA acquired it back in 2007, and I don't know if they had any particular project that they used to route the funds for the acquisition that I'm not aware of.
Is this with one of the CDCs or NOAA that's helping to build this?
So we will be recommending on the 14th at the next Public Facilities Commission that NOAA is the designated developer.
Okay.
But that's pending approval by the Public Facilities Commission.
And for how many units again?
It would be 41 total units,
All affordable?
about two-thirds affordable, and Councillor Wu actually received a breakdown. I don't know if you want to share that or if we want to go over that again.
33 rental, 80%, 20% market, and then 30% fourth, 30% paid, 60%, 17 artists, and then 9 market.
Oh, excellent. And then I think one of the recurring questions I'm getting when it comes to mass projects in East Boston, since we're dealing with a large displacement issue, is how do we make sure, or could you walk me through the process for how folks locally get access to the lottery or
Right.
prior?
Councillor
Just did that
Wu
on
touched
my-
on that as well.
No, that's great.
Sorry about that.
No worries. So once we have the tentative developer designation on the books,
Great
hopefully
minds
on
think
March
alike,
14th.
right?
Absolutely, yep. Then we would begin the one-year diligence period that can be extended. And during that time, we will be working to finalize the funding, the financing for the project, all of the variances that are required, all of the permitting. It's at that time, too, that we'll also engage the Office of Fair Housing, and we'll get them to approve the Fair Housing Plan, and all of those matters are worked out. We do have a new anti-displacement program at the department
Right.
that is very new, that we are pushing every time we get the opportunity, and that is collaborated and coordinated through Fair Housing. So
Okay.
once we actually designate a developer, then we can begin the process of working with Fair Housing and determine what preference language is going to be allowed for the project.
Is that plan readily available now?
I believe it is. I believe we can forward that to you.
Oh, excellent, thank you. And then in terms of and I'm sure you probably walked through the schedule already, when is shovel going in the ground expected?
Likely no time soon, to be honest with you.
That's true.
We'll be doing the designation on March 14th, and that starts the one-year period.
Mm-hmm.
But in these cases of heavily subsidized projects, they usually have to go after many sources of funding. Often that's through the state as well.
Right.
And those have a process that usually takes several years to get all the financing together.
Okay,
That is just an estimate, though, based on, common practice and common experience. Once we have them fully designated, then we can go through the full funding process and make final determinations of where those sources of funding are going to come from. There are few projects that the city is the sole funder on, but when we do have those projects, those move much quickly. When we have to go to the state to get funding, usually there's a pipeline, a queue of funding projects, and they have to go back to the state a number of times before they can get their award.
is this going to be done in phases in terms of I know with some of the larger projects, it's phased and funded, phased and funded, phased and funded.
Nope, this would be a one-phase project.
Okay. And what's the cost?
I actually have, the total development cost will be $12,700,000 and change.
Okay.
Again, that's the preliminary budget that's been proposed by the developer that we anticipate recommending for tentative designation, subject to change based on the developer that ultimately is selected and their final budgets.
Okay.
But that's the current project cost.
And there were ownership opportunities in here? I'm so sorry.
Some ownership and some rental.
Could, I'd love some follow-up to discuss the ownership opportunities in general, especially in affordable buildings or projects that our CDCs are running. I'm curious, is there any room to really have a robust discussion of rent-to-own and how folks can really get on a pathway to ownership in an alternative way? It's not being discussed enough. I just feel like there's a special mission that CDCs have when it comes to developing a neighborhood and economic equity that traditionally developers don't have. Also, we've seen the many studies on the racial wealth gap, and I think ownership is directly connected to the ability to access wealth and to pass it down generationally. A lot of people cannot still, even in affordable units, come up with a down payment.
Right.
Many people can rent, though, for some time. So I'm wondering if I would like to see a robust analysis on rent-to-own in the near future, or maybe we can have a further discussion about how that can be incorporated.
We could certainly have a further discussion, and once we do have a developer designated come March 14th, at that time, we can also begin in more in-depth conversations about all of the financing and ownership structures that we'd like to consider.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
So I just had one final set of questions on sort of climate resiliency and preparedness. And I know NOAA is doing a lot here. But particularly, I mean, given what we've seen just even this last
Just
weekend.
very
and
recently, right?
More to come. What are sort of the provisions, or is there any standard language that that D&D/BPDA will be thinking about adding just to require certain levels of resiliency? Because, you know, there's some other cities that have gone so far as to require affordable housing to be either passive house use or, you know, hit certain standards. And there's lots of mutual benefits of making sure our affordable housing stock is up to those standards, not just for longevity and protection and residents not having the funds to afford mitigation and you know, all the cleanup that could happen from damage from climate change, but also the utility, you know, less cost of utilities and not having to spring for the heat and air conditioning if
Right.
the house is insulated.
So standard policy for the Department of Neighborhood Development is for all of our projects to be LEED certifiable. We don't require that they actually go through the certification process because that's an additional amount of money that doesn't really change what's actually being built. It just essentially buys a plaque. But we do make sure that they are built to the same certifiable standards, so that's one thing that we
Just
do.
LEED, which level of LEED?
I believe it's LEED Silver for this type of
Okay.
project. This project would very likely require some zoning relief, so it would go through the BPDA. And I'm not exactly sure what measures they would want to implement or how they're
Okay.
thinking about.
I mean, is there any opportunity to, or I would be curious as to if you've done any cost-benefit analysis of bumping up the standards there. I mean, I'm just learning more. I'm now 2 months into my chairmanship of this committee, but I'm told that LEED is actually not the most rigorous anyway, and, you know, there's certain systems and we have to have some way of judging.
Right.
But if there are more aggressive, more protective standards we could reach for.
Right. As you mentioned, it's a cost-benefit
Yeah.
analysis, right? Trying to make sure that we are creating as many units of housing as we need while at the same time being respectful to the environment and taking the future into consideration. So right now, the department has settled on the LEED Silver. That's not to say,
How long has it been that standard?
probably a few years.
Okay, okay. Yeah, not necessarily on this, but
I
just using
completely
the
understood.
opportunity
Not-
while I have you
yeah.
all here.
Yep, absolutely. And we're happy to follow up on that. We could also bring together some folks from the BPDA to have a larger
Okay.
discussion.
Yeah, I had called, there was a hearing order in my committee anyway on this idea of trying to find that synergy between city-owned or city-funded development, redevelopment, and resiliency. So
Right.
we'll make sure that all lines
Yeah,
up.
that'd be a great follow-up.
Is there anything else that you think that we should know about this project that we haven't asked about?
I believe we've covered everything.
Okay, great. Are you good, Counselor?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We will be presenting this to the council then at our meeting on Wednesday. And I'm not seeing anyone who might be interested in public testimony. Neil? You're good? Okay. So then this concludes the hearing on docket number 0286, message in order to declare surplus city-owned parcels in East Boston District, Ward 1. And the hearing on docket 0286 is adjourned.